Greetings, YouTube friends. Today I'm joined by Allen Reminick, a fellow market forecaster whose work blends historical cycles, Gann principles, step cycles, and Vedic astrology. Allen's work is built around the idea that markets repeat through time with recognizable structures that can be studied, tested, and applied. In this conversation, we're going to explore his system and compare notes on the current market environment. Welcome, Allen.
Thank you, Margo. It's nice to meet you, and it's wonderful to be here. And it's a glorious day. It's supposed to be 88 degrees today in Iowa.
Amazing.
Which,
It's beautiful here too as well. It's a lovely time of year in the Northern Hemisphere, most places.
so you want to know a little bit about my background. So, first of all, I've been doing this for a long time. I started way before, so in the 1970s, I was a math professor in New York City. Okay. And then I moved to the Midwest around 1981, 82. Been there ever since. And I've been working on Gann type principles pretty much the whole time. I started out with Elliott Wave in 1984. And I was teaching Elliott Wave stuff for a while. And then got involved with Jerry Baumring. Have you heard of Jerry? Dr.
I've heard
Baumring?
of it, but I haven't studied his work.
Okay, well, Jerry Baumring was an authentic, first of all, he was a genius, okay? The guy could read a book and tell you what's on page 137, paragraph 4, word for word, okay?
Wow.
Yeah. And he, after a lot of work and a lot of frustration, he actually figured out what W.B. Gann was actually doing. Not what people think he was doing, not what Gann wrote down, but he really got it. And so, and he started making, ridiculous amount of money. And he and his wife, he was a chemist, teaching chemistry in Southern California. His wife was a nurse. They had a pharmacy because he knew how to, put together the drugs and medicines. So they sold the pharmacy, got $100,000 out of that. His wife did not like the idea of selling the pharmacy because that was, a good source of income and all this. His first year, he took the $100,000 and made it into 2.7 million.
Wow.
Okay. That's when money was money.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the equivalent of like about 100 million now,
Yeah.
And then he realized, okay, the stuff I do works. So a couple of years later, he started teaching, and he gave seminars in, again, every 3 months, there'd be another seminar, it'd be all over the country. And I was lucky to find him. I did, I'm living in the Midwest and he's in California, but a friend of mine happened to be out in California and saw, you ever hear of Mason Sexton?
No. Nope.
Okay. Mason, the name Mason Sexton is like, it's something out of like, I don't know, like a Pythagorean, book. Anyway, Mason he was being interviewed on a television station, and my friend was in the audience, and Baumring was in the audience. And after the interview with Mason Sexton, and he's a bright guy, knows a lot of Gann stuff. Baumring gets up and it introduces himself to Mason Sexton, who's the star, right? He said, "That was very interesting. If only you knew what you were talking about." He insulted him.
Wow.
Anyway, so my friend Steve was in the audience, and he let me know about Jerry. And then I was lucky. I started taking these seminars. Took 3 years, every 3 months. And in those days, the seminar wasn't on Zoom. You had to take an airplane to a hotel. You know,
Yeah.
spend 2 days there, give him $1,000 for the seminar. And so it was a very long-term thing, but it was great. And it made the difference between me and I'm a smart guy, I know what I'm doing, right? But you're not going to make money in the markets unless you have somebody who really knows something to teach you. It's kind of like that. I was lucky. And so after the 3 years of training, I started getting really accurate. My forecasts were getting really good. And aside from my own trading, which was I was making money, but I didn't have a lot of money back then. So it was kind of like, building up. But what I ended up doing is giving advice to professional traders. I had clients, hedge fund managers, and later in 2007 started a company in California with a partner, and it's called Blue Apple Trends. And we were giving advice mostly to big institutional traders, like big commodity trading companies. I had 9 multi-billion-dollar clients at the time. Okay. And then I'm getting old. So, there comes a point you're not that eager to chase after new clients or do this or do that. I don't really, I don't do any, I don't do any chasing anymore. So anyway, I ended up making a lot of money giving advice. They pay me 100 grand for the reports I would write, this kind of thing. And but they were accurate. And I also found out something else, that even these professionals could not forecast. They had no clue how to forecast. They could make money. There's a lot of ways to make money without being able to forecast. All right. Yeah. So it was a very satisfying thing. 3 years ago, because my wife insisted, she says, we're going to put you on YouTube. I said, what am I going to talk about? She said, just talk. Just get up and talk. 5 in the morning, she says, you're going to get on YouTube. 7 in the morning, we had a YouTube channel, and I'm talking about cycles. What did I know? So the Gann stuff is all about cycles. At the same time, a sideshow, in 1988, I went on an Ayurvedic medicine training program in India, in New Delhi. And it's all about learning how to read the pulse and herbal stuff. It's a naturopathic. Halfway through this 2-month program, this astrologer gets up on stage and says, listen, a lot of diseases, if you've already got them, it's too late. Okay. You need to know beforehand when you're going to get them, and then start taking herbs and do various practices before that. So he taught us about 2 weeks of Vedic astrology. I was, enough to be dangerous, right? I found out later that I was getting the right answers and doing it completely wrong, So that was the beginning of it. And then I started doing, it was the same year I started with Baumring. So there was this kind of overlap between the Gann stuff on the one side, and he didn't do astrology. Baumring did not. He did mathematical approaches to forecasting that Gann actually used. And Gann talked about astrology, and there's quite a bit of reference to it, but that wasn't the key to his stuff. Okay. So I realized also that at that time, the Vedic astrology lined up perfectly with Baumring's stuff. So I was doing his stuff and then finding the cycles in the Vedic thing, and then doing his stuff. And I would tell him about this. He would say, yeah, that's what we're doing. Yeah, that's what we're doing. Yeah, that's what we're doing. So he didn't even know, And it was wonderful to see the interaction between the astrology and the mathematics. And I like the mathematics. I'm a math guy, right? That's what I do. So that developed. And so now, 3 years ago, I started the YouTube channel. Initially, I had another YouTube channel. It was called, got the name. Something like History Cycles Reveal the Future. It was something, I'll find out the name. History Cycles Reveal the Future. It was all about very big cycles that I discovered. I actually discovered quite a bit since then. Many of the things I teach now, nobody knows. Okay. I've discovered maybe 100 things. Okay. I've developed 200 algorithms. Okay. We're not talking about a little bit of stuff. We're talking about a lifetime of work. And in the course that I teach, it's a 3-month course, and I try to squeeze as much in 3 months as I can to get everybody on the right footing. And they were amazing. The students, many of them are professional traders. These guys are not beginners. Okay. They've been trading 20, 30, 40 years, but they don't know how to forecast. So you throw the forecasting on top of, somebody who has a really good Wyckoff knowledge, or, you're talking about Hearst. Some of these guys know Hearst. Some of these guys know Elliott Wave inside out. They know all sorts of volume studies. They measure gamma and delta and, option experts. But then you throw the forecasting on top of it and like, they're like in heaven because it changes your view of the whole thing from, okay, let's see what the trade will yield. And we'll see when the system says I should get out to, I know what's going to happen. And I know I'm going to stay in this trade probably 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And I'm not getting out the first time it goes down,
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a different type feeling, And so that's been what I've been doing lately. We make about 1 video a week. That's as much as I can deal with. It takes 4 hours to make a 5-minute video,
I know how that is.
And I'm teaching 3 what I call clinics, 3 days a week, and I teach a new group every 3 months, a new bunch of students, and then the clinics are ongoing for those who want to continue with the program. They can continue to do the clinics as long as they choose. Okay, so it's an ongoing group, and the group has gotten, I don't know, maybe 200 people in it now. It's not large. On my YouTube channel, I have about 12,500 subscribers. It slowly grew. It started with 44. Okay. I did nothing. We don't advertise. I don't pay any money to anybody for anything. My wife is a genius. She can do anything. She can edit. She can create. She can cut my hair. She can do anything, needed to create the videos and edit the videos and create the website and handle the money and all that. And so I'm just teaching basically. And I still trade. I'm not as active as I used to be because I could care less, truthfully. What I really care about right now is transmitting as much of this, decent, solid information to people and let them use it. And some of the guys I work with are, very, very active. Some of them are very wealthy and they're making tons of and the kind of money that most people would fall off their chairs, And it's not me. See, the whole thing is it's not me. It never was me. This is all about the knowledge. It's almost like representing a tradition of knowledge that goes back to Baumring, that goes back to Gann, that goes back to astrologers in the 1800s, that goes ultimately back to the Pythagoreans in ancient Greece, who had all this secret, stuff. And a lot of what I do is private and secret, So I haven't really been telling people exactly what I do. A lot of it comes out on the YouTube. I talk about a 49-week cycle. So where did the 49-week cycle come from? Okay. Well, if you dig a little bit, it turns out that's the amount of time that the sun north node interaction happens every year. The sun is conjunct the north node, and then they separate. It's the synodic cycle of the sun Rahu. Okay. Rahu is the Vedic term for the north node. Ketu is the Vedic term for the south node. Okay. And so that's why the 49-week cycle. And then there's another cycle, and I explain, astrologically where they're coming from, why they're there, how they're phased at a particular time. And ultimately, the essence of the game is that there's one cycle. If there was one cycle, it'd be very, very, very simple. There are multiple cycles, It's like in music, if you hear a middle C on the piano, you're hearing a dominant 440 or whatever. But inside of that note, there's a certain percentage of G, certain percentage of F, certain percentage even of F sharp and B flat, very small amounts, because it's a harmonic relationship. There's no individual pure cycle, not naturally. No, in the modern world, they have lasers that can create an exact light frequency, and it excludes all the other frequencies. And everything in the modern world, it's gotten to the point of exclusion and precision and exactness. But in nature, things are not like that. Like in modern medicine, they have the active ingredient, is some chemical, right? So then they figure if this is the active ingredient, we'll isolate that chemical, we'll make a drug out of it, and that'll be, Ayurvedic medicine, they don't do that. They say the herb that it's coming from has not only that chemical in it, but it has a bunch of other things, and that lets the body digest the chemical in a way that doesn't have side effects. Okay. So when you start screwing around with that level of natural law, you're also in a position that you can throw things out of whack, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but the point is, what Gann knew and what seems to be the truth is the market is a bunch of rhythms.
Yeah.
It's a bunch of cycles. And you need to keep track of enough of them so that you can combine them. Like in Hearst, you have a combination of a larger cycle and a medium-sized cycle and a third. And they're, it has these little these little kind of tubes,
Yeah.
that's basically the reality of the thing. And so the trick is, how do you find those cycles? Where are they? Which ones are happening right now? What's dominant right now? And what's going to happen next, right? That
Yeah.
was what Gann knew. He knew how to find which part of history is repeating right now and
Yep.
locate it. And then once you do that, you need to verify it. So you can also verify that cycle is real because there's another one that's related to it that's also real. And then
Mm-hmm.
they both do the same thing going forward. So you have a high probability that the thing's going to go up for 6 weeks and then down for 2 weeks and like that. So the basis of the formula is locating. It's a formula. It's a math. It's not a algorithm that you plug into a computer. There's a
Right.
little bit of judgment at the beginning. You have to decide where you're going to start. You make a
Yeah.
decision. Once you make that decision, the whole thing is automatic. And then you locate that section of history, you project it forward. I have
Mm-hmm.
a thing called the slide technique where you can take the data and kind of overlay it. So, let's say 13 years ago, something, you overlay it on the most recent data and you see
Yeah.
the correlation. And then
Yep.
because it already happened, you can project what happened 13 years ago into the future and get hopefully a reasonably decent model for the future. Okay. So that's ultimately the basis of Gann. That's the basis of the philosophy that history repeats,
Yeah.
and that if you can locate the correct sections of history, then you have an advantage insofar as having a reasonably good idea what will come next. Okay, uh, that's kind of the summary of the work.
Yeah. When I first found you, I saw one of your YouTube videos. And it was actually just last year. I've been trading since 2017, and then I became pretty entrenched in astrology. I've always loved astrology, but then I got really deep into it around about 2019. And then all of a sudden it clicked that I could actually time the markets using planetary cycles, really using mathematics at the core, right? Understanding synodic cycles and beyond synodic cycles, understanding, just like you said, what I call it a handoff, what cycle is handing off, right? So what cycle is kind of the ruling cycle, if you will, and that's not necessarily defined by like a chart ruler per se, right? But then I created what I call analogs that I started identifying these cycles. And so when I found your YouTube channel, I was like, wow, I think he's doing something similar to what I'm doing. And so then when I reached out to you, I was like, wow, I really wanted to hear more about it. So that's incredible. And that's what I've found, is that it's really about identifying the cycles that are operating right now. And then I do the same thing. I forecast them forward, probably not with the same tools that you do. And I'm sure not with the exact same system, but fascinating. I love that. Yeah.
You're on the same wavelength.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
there's not a lot of people on that wavelength. You're talking to way out of the box,
Yeah. Yes.
but
Way
that's
out of the
okay,
box.
you know. And that's
What's
okay,
fascinating.
because what
Yes.
ends up happening is the people who locate me,
Yeah.
they are kind of, kindred spirits in some way. They have a similar desire to really understand the truth of what's happening here. Because there's so much stuff out there that is, you can't even describe how bad it is. I mean, it's just.
Yeah. Yes. It's true.
So that's that's been my kind of story.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of methods, so at this point, just to give you a feel for it, the primary tool is this formula for locating which chunks of time are repeating and projecting. Um, but what I did was after many, many years of doing astrology, and I've done about 25,000 individual charts for people.
Wow. Mhm.
Okay. And so I'm familiar with that part of it.
Yeah.
And then in the markets, you realize that what's going on in the market doesn't necessarily work the same way as when you do a person's chart. Okay.
Right.
Like Jupiter in exaltation sign in the sign of Cancer, is supposed to be very auspicious for people.
Mhm.
But if you look back at the stock market in
Yeah.
1931, the market crashed the whole year when Jupiter was
Yes.
exalted. When it stopped being exalted, the market went up.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
opposite,
Yeah, I found a similar pattern
you
with
know?
the Jupiter across the ascendant of the New York. I use the McWhirter rectification of the New York Stock Exchange, which puts the ascendant at about 14 degrees and some odd minutes Cancer. And I found the same thing is that when Jupiter specifically hits that critical degree of 14 to 15 degrees Cancer, it's typically unfavorable for the markets. Yeah.
Right. That's the way it works. So having that background, the what I do is I created these astrological composite wave models
Hmm.
that are computerized.
Hmm.
And they are ultimately taking several different astrological combinations, let's say. Let's say a simple one, when the sun goes to 20 degrees every year.
Hmm.
Okay, there's a 1 year cycle. Another one might be Mars at 53 degrees. Okay.
Hmm.
Right. Turns out, for example, if you put this is now using the sidereal zodiac, not the tropical zodiac. I remember, so there's a
Yep.
24-degree difference. The
Yes.
Vedic numbers are 24 degrees less
Yep.
than the Western. So if you buy the bonds, US 30-year treasuries, when Mars gets to 53 degrees of the zodiac, and sell or go short when it gets to the opposite position, which is 233 degrees, over the last 20 years, it's about 85% accurate.
Wow.
Okay. Okay. That's one planet and
Yeah.
one cycle. Okay.
Yeah.
So what happens if you use 6 cycles?
Yeah.
You can get even more accurate than that. Okay. So that's what I do. So what I've been doing is I've developed a lot of these time-based signals. They're based on the timing only.
Hmm.
And I give them to the kids. Everybody's a kid. It's like 80-year-old students, So some of them. So but I gave them 6 systems like that last June, and they're automatic, and I just gave them the dates. You buy
Hmm.
at this time on Tuesday, you sell the next Thursday at 2 p.m. You buy the next week at Monday at 2:38, and you sell the following Thursday. And all 6 systems have made good money this year doing nothing other than that. Now you need to
Wow.
control your risk. Obviously, you can't
Yeah.
like let them go against you too far. But I have the parameters. I tell them, you have to use this amount of risk maximum. I also gave the stats. If you go for a $2,000 profit, you'll get it 74%. If you go for a $5,000 profit, you'll get it 60%. This kind of thing. So they can decide up front if they want to hold it the full time period, because sometimes it'll win more getting out before the end of the time period, even though the end of the time period is later. Okay. To
Hmm.
give you one example, a simple one, when the moon is conjunct with the south node every month, okay, tends to be
Hmm.
bullish. At least it
Hmm.
has been the last 10 or 15 years. Okay. And the statistics are if you buy when the moon is conjunct the south node and sell or go short, but better not to go short. When you buy when the moon is conjunct Ketu and sell when it's conjunct Rahu, it wins 70% of the time for 2 weeks.
Wow.
That's in the S&P. Okay.
Yep.
So and I have a software guy he used to be a Harvard professor. He figured out programming himself. He's been working with me since 1998, and I'll give him something to do. He'll code it in 3 days and give it back to me, you know. So I have about 25 of these algorithms to test ideas to see if they
Hmm.
work or they don't work. What does it work? Work means that there's a high percentage of winners over a long period of time. I'm not interested in a particular trade worked or a particular trade didn't work. I want to know what happens if you do it 1,000 times. How
Mm-hmm.
many times does it work? And then you know your odds. It's like a poker player who knows their odds versus guessing or hoping or wishing or whatever. And usually, given the S&P, I have data. I have data on the Dow back to 1885, daily data.
Mm-hmm.
On some of the commodities, you can get it back. Baumring had it back to like 160 years on
Wow.
cotton, on some of the other more. But that gives you the big stuff, right? But on the S&P now, you have every tick. You have
Mm-hmm.
every tick. So if you want to test something, you have data that can allow you to discern whether or not it's really true or not to a level of precision that never existed before with the computers doing the work. So that's
Mm-hmm.
phenomenal. And that's been the value add that the computers bring that Gann didn't have. He did everything by hand.
It's astounding, I know, to think about the doing all of it by hand, being a person who has had the opportunity to use computers in my whole trading career.
Right, right. And Baumring he didn't like computers. He
Yeah.
was like, I'll outtrade any computer. That was a quote. And he would make the charts by hand. He
Yeah.
didn't even want to print the chart. He said you get a feel for the market when you actually draw the lines.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't do that. But anyway, I love the fact that the computer is so helpful. But it's not helpful if you don't have any knowledge. You can
I
play games with the thing, and you can try 1,000 things and none of them work. You
yeah.
have to have an idea where you're going. You need kind of a theoretical framework to start with, and then you can see if it works or not. If you give the computer ultimate leeway to try every conceivable thing, it'll go through 100 billion combinations. It'll take 200 years.
Yeah.
It may not come up with anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
It needs a well-trained guiding hand.
right, right.
Absolutely.
You need an idea about what's really, what's happening, what's really happening. So that's
Yeah.
that's kind of what I do now. So I have a lot of these algorithms, and that's part of it. The other part of it is the what I call the slide technique, which is it's kind of variation that I threw in, where you take an interval, whatever size, if it's a correct cycle, you can slide it over the data,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll find at some point a lock and key kind of a fit.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's a high to a low, or a low to a low, or maybe just a fast move up and a fast move down. There's some sort of sameness value in terms
Yeah.
of the repetition. And when you find the correct phasing, you can literally see the market repeat.
Mm-hmm.
So the
Yeah.
concept of history repeating, Gann called it the law of periodicity. He
Mm-hmm.
didn't use the word cycle.
Yeah.
He wasn't emphasizing what most people think of as a cycle is you have a low and then it goes up and you have a high and it goes down and you have a low and what Gann was saying about was not only the low and the high are determined, but the
Mm-hmm.
pathway up and the pathway down actually have a uniform structure
Mm-hmm.
for a particular cycle. So that if you figured that out, I call it stepwise, the step cycle thing. If you see the steps of development of the thing and the steps of collapse of the thing, then you have another layer of information that you're not dependent upon buying the low.
Right.
There's another low coming,
Yeah.
okay? And the first low, the market may be coming down like a wild, crazy, a knife,
Mm-hmm.
and you may not want to buy it then. It's too risky. But if you wait for that low to come in and where the next low is within a day or so, you know where the next low is. You wait for the second one, then you have a stop loss order under the original low, and the probabilities of having a winning trade with less risk is greater. So that's what I show them how to use these repetitions of patterns of history and locating the swings in the individual cycles so that they can really understand how that cycle works. It's not a sine wave. The sine waves are generally true on a small time frame,
Mm-hmm.
but the larger cycles are not sinusoidal. And
Right.
that's a distinction between what I've been doing and what Gann was doing and what Hearst was doing.
Yeah.
Hearst believed that the way radio waves was the same way the market works.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
only true. It's only true in the short term. The long term stuff, it starts getting out of sync, and you wonder why, because the cycle was never a sine wave.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have observed that they shift in different harmonic ratios actually over time, on particularly on the longer term cycles.
Right. And so that's another piece of the puzzle, is knowing the actual structure of this interval. It's a 20-year interval, but what does it look like inside it? What are the swings? So, for example, you have a low in 1922 in the stock market. 20 years and 2 months later, there's a low in April of 1942. 20 years and 2 months later, there's a low in June of 1962. 20 years and 2 months later, there's a low in August of 1982. 20 years and 2 months later, to the day, in October of 2002, there's the low. 20 years and 2 months later, in December of 2022, is a low. The next one will come in January 2043. So you know where the extreme is, but what does it do in the middle? What does
Yeah.
it do between those two 20-year bottoms? And that's what we study. And that's what we try to figure out, is where are the internal structural change points. For example, Gann talked about the 10-year cycle. And most people would think, well, a 10-year cycle will go up for 5 years and come down for 5 years. But it doesn't
Mm,
work that way.
no.
It turns out there's a low, and then 3 years later, there's a low, and then 3 years later, there's a low, and then 4 years later, there's a low.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an unequal way of slicing up the 10 years, and that repeats. So you get 3,
Mm-hmm.
3, 4, 3, 3, 4, 3, 3, 4. And if you know that to start with, you're not going to be fooled when it doesn't go up 5 years to a high.
Yeah.
See? So it's knowledge. It's all about knowledge. It's all about structure. It's all about understanding. These things are much more mathematically structured than most people would imagine. Um, and that's kind of what, I try to emphasize in my stuff, is teaching that and giving people an understanding of how do you isolate that structure. Okay. Now, for example, I'll tell you some really cool stuff. Like right now, the S&P had this huge rally, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the rally was caused by the Saturn-Rahu synodic cycle. The angle between Saturn and the North Node, when the market made a high March 1st and
Mm-hmm.
then came down to the low March 30th, I measured the angle between Saturn and the North Node, and I think it was 13 degrees. Then I
Mm-hmm.
went back every 11 and a half years when that angle happened before, and it happened
Mm.
before, and it happened before. I went back 110 years. And every single time, soon after that high, the market had an explosive rally.
Very nice. That's a very, very nice correlation.
So seeing that,
Yeah.
it became clear to me what was going to happen. And even if I wasn't exactly right on the low, I did get the low finally. I was off by 2 weeks because I saw a couple of possibilities before that it might start. But even if you're not, you know what's going to happen. I was constantly looking to buy. I wasn't
Yeah.
ever convinced this thing's going lower, that kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Me too.
And
Yeah. I
and
was
then,
accumulating at that point too. Yeah.
yeah, I know. I heard your thing. You had called that bottom. So
Yeah.
the bottom line of the whole thing is, but what caused it
Yeah.
was an 11-year interval. Now you could pick it up with 3-month and 5-month intervals, smaller cycles, okay? But
Mm-hmm.
you wouldn't have seen the explosion.
Yeah.
The explosion happened every single time. And if you go back 11, I was listening to the radio, or no, somebody on YouTube was saying, he didn't know what was going on. Why is this thing, it's cranking up like that? He said, there was something like that in 2014. There was something like that in 1992, right? I heard
Yeah.
on the radio, the last time it happened was 1992, blah, blah, blah. The one in 2014 was exactly 11 and a half years earlier.
I wonder if the
The
cycle I was
cycle of
tracking
Saturn.
falls inside of that. Hold on. I was tracking a cycle from 1980. Well, it's close. It would be 4.1 times 11. That's interesting.
Okay.
Yeah,
11,
different
11 is another.
cycles, but like you said, it's the cycles within cycles. So that at some point, I a lot of times they overlap or line up. It's so fascinating to me to hear the different methods that you use, and I love how, mathematics is the universal language. It's the only language you can go anywhere in the world, and 2 + 2 is always going to be 4, right? You can go
Right.
to sacred sites all around the world, and the same mathematics is being used there. So whether you use the Vedic system, I actually am familiar with all three systems. I'm not a Vedic astrologer. I'm primarily a tropical astrologer, but I actually use heliocentric, tropical, and I'm familiar with Vedic.
Right.
And it doesn't matter which language you use because mathematics underpins all of them, in my opinion, and there could be reasons for any one from various different angles, but yeah, thank you so much for sharing, some of your techniques and your story, because I just find it fascinating to hear, the ways in which different people apply different techniques, same concepts of forecasting the market, but different techniques that get us all there. And sometimes we all get to the same point using different methods.
That's right. So the other thing is, having looked at a lot of historical things, there was a lot of history that was repeating, and it's mind-blowing.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the day, March 1st, when the war in Iran started, and you go back 11 and a half years, 11 and a half years, 11 and a half years, and you do it exactly. It's not 11 and a half. It turns out like 11.4 one time because the planets move slower and faster and they interact using the same angle over and over. It lined up with, for example, 2 cycles earlier was when the Iraq War started in 2003. 3 cycles earlier was when the Iraq War started in 1991.
Wow.
4 cycles earlier, December 3rd, 1979, was when Khomeini was made the supreme leader in Iran. 4 cycles later, Khomeini is killed to the day that the other one started, this had ended. Okay. Also in 1991, it was the end of the Soviet Union. In December of 1991 was the end of the Soviet Union as an entity. It broke up into a bunch of individual countries. If you go 69 years earlier than that, to the day was the beginning of the Soviet Union. This is all lined up with the same day this Iran war started. Okay. If you go back another cycle, you have to find that was the end of the Ottoman Empire, which had been existing for 700 years. Okay. Wow. If you go now, the full synodic cycle, the synodic cycle of the planet is 11.46 years, but each time it happens, it's in a different part of the zodiac.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So 11 and a half years, it's got something different about it than double that because it's in a different place. They're together again, but it's a different place. You have to go 13 times to get them back where they started 13 times ago.
Yep.
So that's 148 years. All right. If you look back 148 years ago in 1878, there was a war. This is the Iran, US, Israel thing. There was a war between the Ottoman Empire and Russia. It's called the Russo-Turkish War. And at that time, now we have the Strait of Hormuz is a big issue that, what's going on in it. At that time, it was the Dardanelles. There was a strait, a waterway that the Turkish were trying to close it off, and the Russians wanted to keep it open. And the British, who are not involved in this so much, they sent their admiral, their navy, to go keep the strait open so that the Ottomans shouldn't shut off this trade route. 148 years later, to the day, is when Trump sent the Navy to open up the strait. Okay. So this concept of history repeating is really amazing, really, even the thing with this particular Saturn-Rahu angle, Hiroshima
Oh,
happened
wow.
with a 5-degree angle between the two. Very close again. They were close together, 5-degree angle. That same 5-degree angle, 69, whatever. I mean, I forgot one of the multiples is when Trump bombed the Iranian nuclear facility.
Wow.
The first use of the nuclear weapon and trying to stop it. In 1957, which is I think seven times 11, uh, that was when the US made a written deal with Iran that they were going to train the Iranian scientists to make nuclear power. The United States
Mm.
started the process of generating nuclear power in Iran, and they didn't plan on bombs. A couple of generations later, the scientists in Iran started fiddling around to try to create. They were using polonium something or other, which you only use to make bombs. And then the Americans discovered that and they realized they were trying to make bombs. So that's when the whole nuclear anti-proliferation treaty started in 1969 and continued. And now Trump has got to try to knock out their nuclear facilities, which we started. Okay.
That's that's so amazing.
You
I always
can't you
say,
can't make this
no, you
stuff
can't
up.
make it up. I know I say that all the time. I it's really just the theme of the astrological cycles. I always think of the statement for those with eyes to see, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And it's brilliant.
Right.
That's
Yes.
great
And
work.
you get completely hooked on this stuff, It's
Totally.
like
Totally.
you
Yeah, one of my favorite Carl Jung quotes is he said, "If I had 10 years left to live, I'd spend it studying astrology." It's just
exactly.
it's
Exactly.
endless. Just that feeling of, I don't know, being inside the truth, like you're revealing something that feels really true. You know, um,
And you can
yeah,
see it.
yeah,
You make your predictions, you see the thing do what you think it's going to do, and then it does it for the same reason. And then the same thing happened the last time it did that, and you go like, I don't need CNBC anymore, it's
yeah.
kind of like
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's like the stage is set. So what will be the story that unfolds in the theme that's already there?
that's that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. All right, so I'll show you a few things that I have
Okay.
some charts and stuff.
Yep. Would love to see.
Obviously, we could go on for about 2.5 years with
Yeah.
this,
Yes.
but
Yes. Yes.
but let's see what I can find here for you. I'm going to go. I use TradeStation. Of
Okay.
course,
Yeah.
I'm
Right.
old. This is the 3 cycles of 11 and a half, 34 and a quarter
Hold on.
years
It's
ago.
still, it's still, there it goes. Okay. All right. There we go.
Okay, so on top, I have a
Hmm.
weekly chart of the Dow. Underneath, a weekly chart of the Dow back 34.25 years. It's sometimes 11 and a half, but it turns out this particular one is 34 and a quarter years. And then what I did was isolated the swings, a lot of swings, as they happen in the recent market, and lined them
Hmm.
up with the swings in the 34 years earlier. So this swing
Wow.
here, this was December 24, the high that came in. This was the April low last year,
Yep.
34 and a half years earlier, the same down move
Yeah.
and the
That's,
same up move. And you see this low over here that
yeah.
started our recent rally? That
Hmm.
was the one that came in December of 1991. And it's
Mm.
exactly in line. That was the one that came up as the best match
Hmm.
historically. On the radio, they mentioned it, that this is the fastest, quickest, biggest rally that in that short period of time that we've seen in 50 years. It was right there. Okay. And if you go back further, look at the swing up from this low here to that high. And this is a long time. You're talking about the scale is on the bottom.
Hmm.
This is a year. So this is 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. It goes all the way back to 2010. Look at
Hmm.
this. This down move lines up with that
Yeah,
down move.
it does.
This up move lines up with that up move. This down move lines up with that down move. This up move lines up with that up move. This one wasn't perfect, but the high and the low came in correct. This low came in with that. This high came in with that. Blah, 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 blah. You're looking at basically 10 years of repetition, and you keep
Yeah.
going back and it's still there. This was the great financial crisis from 2007 to 2009. Guess where it came from? This was the crash in 1974.
Oh, wow. This is excellent work. I mean, that's incredible. Because I find that oftentimes when I'm running the cycles that I call analogs, I oftentimes find that they deviate and running even a whole calendar year because I'm looking at actually shorter planetary cycles. This is a brilliant long-term cycle. This is great work.
Yeah, I know. And see, the thing about it is, why is it better than just 11 and a half years, even though that is repeating?
Yeah.
And I can show you on a 5-minute bar chart. The October 15th low in 2014 lines up with the March 30th low this year. And on a 5-minute bar chart, the movement up is 97% correlated with
Wow.
the move we just did.
That's incredible.
I know. But why wasn't the 11 and a half year cycle as good long term? It's been there, and I can show you another.
Yeah.
I have a bunch of. I can show you that it's been working for a couple of years on a
Yeah.
daily. On a daily, it's also like 95%. Ridiculous, but it doesn't have the same longevity. It doesn't continue to repeat for as long, right? So
Yeah.
the natural question is, why would one cycle of 11 and a half years be good for a long time, but not super long? And this one's been repeating for 20 years.
Yeah.
The reason is, and this is something that I discovered a long time ago, if you look at where the conjunction takes place, the
Yes.
one in 1991 took place right at the beginning of Capricorn. The one that happened last year in the sidereal took place at about 2 degrees of Pisces. Okay. There was a 60-degree rotation from one conjunction to the other. When you have a 60 or 120-degree motion of a planetary position, even a synodic cycle, the periodicity continues longer. Okay. That's a discovery that I made a year ago or two. That cycle is repeating, and it'll continue for a long time. If you want to get and understand what the future is, take a look at 34 years ago and project.
Project it
It's
forward.
yeah, it's been very reliable. Okay, and there are other cycles. All right, that one is caused by the synodic cycle of Saturn and the node. Saturn and the node. Okay? You can use the conjunction as the starting point, whatever you want. The low came in last year. April 7th was the low in 2025 in the stock market, and there was a secondary low on April 21st. The secondary low on April 21st was the conjunction. Okay.
Yeah.
And
I remember.
that was a retest low, and then it took off from there anyway. So it was kind of it was very, very good. And we were forecasting that. And back in November and December, there's a low in April. It's going to come in around this low. And most people couldn't believe the market could go down, and it went down like 20%. And that's what happened every single time. The other thing about this is also important. Looking at the Saturn-Rahu synodic cycle over many, many, many iterations, that start point is always bullish. And not only is it always bullish, every single time, without exception, 5 years later, the market was higher than that point. In other words, 4,800 on the S&P is not going to get taken out in a meaningful way for a long, 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 long time. And how many people think that? Okay. Now, and that doesn't mean you can't have a bear market.
Right.
Okay. Like in 1969, you had a bear market, but as soon as it was over, it recovered and went up to make new highs 5 years after the low. Okay. So there were two cases, 1957, 1969. We had a big break in the middle, and then it regained its strength. But the Saturn-Rahu synodic cycles uniformly go up for at least 5 years from the low. And the Saturn-Ketu, which is the opposite node, every 3 of them, just the 60-degree rotation thing. So every 34 years, you get a killer, deadly bear market. The most recent one happened October 11th of 2007, was the Saturn-Ketu conjunction in the sign of Leo in the Vedic. Okay, but it's a conjunction either way. That was the high for the great financial crisis. If you go back 3 cycles earlier, you get the 1974 bear market.
Wow.
If you go back 3 cycles earlier, you get the 1940 crash when Hitler attacked France. That was when he first attacked Europe. First, he attacked Poland in 1939, but the real war started when he attacked Europe. And there was a waterfall decline that was exactly in line with what happened in 1974. The one in 1974 was when President Nixon resigned. 3 days after he resigned, you had this humongo decline. And the one in 2008, interestingly enough, this is so fun. If you look at the high in 07, it lines up with the low last year in 2025. Okay. But the market since then has gone up. I mean, even with our pullback in March, it's basically in an uptrend since then. Our low that came in the second time, the one that just happened, it's that we are repeating the great financial crisis upside down.
Upside down. I've noticed that actually. Yeah, that I've noticed that.
And you can see what's going to happen. There's a 17 and a half year interval. It's 11 and a half times 1.5 because K cause that high and Rahu is the cause of this low. Okay. But if you slide your cursor over, you'll see, you know what happened now that just happened that made this market explode, which nobody really understands why. You know what happened 17 and a half years ago was the market had gone down, but it really didn't fall apart until Lehman Brothers went out of business. They claimed bankruptcy was the 20-something of September 2008. And that's when you had the waterfall explosive decline that caused everybody to freak out, including the government. That lines up with the rally. When the worst part of the decline happened, it lines up with the best part of this rally. Okay. Symmetry, right? And if you look closely, on November 21st, 2008 was a low, wasn't the low, but it was a low, and you had a bounce for about a month and a half. That lines up with this week.
Very, very, very cool.
So there's some kind of a high here, whether it goes higher or not. I'm expecting it to go higher, but there's some kind of a high here, and then it falls down into July. And then it goes, and then it should go up at least until September, this rally, after one more one decent dip. And so this is how you do it. You look at the planetary thing that caused that and the opposite. Now, the reason it's more useful than a normal opposition is that not only was a Ketu Saturn conjunction causing the break and a Rahu Saturn conjunction causing the rally, they were on the opposite sides of the zodiac. So there was a real good deal of opposition and sameness at the same time. And when you have that, you see the thing tit for tat, just do the whole thing upside down, you know, and it's been happening. So that's another little, fun thing that we noticed using the astrology that other people like scratching their heads, what in the world? And why is it happening? And why did the war happen? And why is the stock market going up even with the war? And all these things are superficial and extrinsically extraneous. They have nothing to do with it, So, so that's kind of, another layer. So the other stuff is, okay, so that's one cycle. The main player, the big one is the Jupiter-Saturn synodic cycle. Okay.
Yeah.
Jupiter and Saturn they combine every 19.85 years, very almost years. Okay. But
Yeah.
again, they do it, and each time they do it, they move around the zodiac.
Yep.
But if
But
you
in the same element sign for every 250 years, right?
that's right,
Roughly. Roughly.
you only
Yeah.
need 60 years to
Yeah.
get back to the same part of the zodiac again.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
So the 60-year cycle is the most reliable and simple cycle. It's about 59.5 years. That's the most simple and reliable cycle in the market. And that has been repeating. If you go back to 1966, it lines up with 2026. 1965 lines up with 2025. It's been working. I checked it. It's been working for 25 years. 25 years. 25
Yeah.
years.
Did you feel like the Great Mutation in 2020 shifted that at all when we moved into air signs? For the historical correlation, you feel like it's still consistent?
It's still there, but it's not the only game in town.
Right. Right.
You have to consider these other slow-moving planets and
Yeah.
how they interact with each other. The model can't be based on one pair,
Right.
even those two. Okay, but just to give you a fun thing, if you look at 3 cycles of this 59 years, you get 118 years is 2 of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the Wright brothers in
Mm-hmm.
19 in the Wright the Wright brothers in 1905, I think it was 1905, they had their first airplane flight
Mm-hmm.
that went up, and 118 years later, Jeff Bezos and Branson, both of those characters, went up in a rocket ship,
Mm-hmm.
and their rocket ship thing lasted for like 9 seconds, and the Wright brothers were up for like 1 minute, and then they came down. 118-year cycle, 2 times 49. If 2 times 59. If you go back another 118 years, it was 1785 was the beginning of the steam engine.
Yes.
It was
Yes.
another form of transportation that came in at that time,
Yep.
which transformed the whole commerce universe, because now you can send stuff across with boats and with the steam engine motor, the trains,
Yep.
the whole transportation thing. So, and then a really cool one, we have in 1842, there was what was called the Opium Wars in
Mm-hmm.
China. And that was when Britain and the US, more Britain, they were dumping opium into China. They
Mm-hmm.
were selling massive amounts of opium to the Chinese. So the emperor of China at that time was not fond of this idea. So first of all, he made it illegal. And then he said, you're not even allowed to you're not even allowed to use silver, which was the primary currency back then that the British had. You're not even allowed to do business in silver, which was killing the British, which is why they started the thing to begin with. Anyway, 177 years later, we have the opioid crisis.
Mm.
Where do you think the opium's coming from?
Mm-hmm.
China. Then it
Yeah.
was going from the West to China, and now it's
Oh,
coming
wow.
from China back to the West. And you
Hmm.
can chart the development of the opium trade back then, and it's lining up with the increasing number of people dying from opioids in the US. You can
Yeah.
actually see the path of that graph.
Wow.
At the same time, in 1828 in Mexico, that was the beginning of Mexico becoming an independent from Spain. Until that time, it was a Spanish colony. They broke free. They revolted, and Santa Anna became the president of Mexico in 1828. And for a long time, there was the need to build up the economy in Mexico. So he invited the Northerners, which were in the U.S. It wasn't the U.S. yet. It was still part of Mexico. They were called the Texans, what now is now Texas. He invited them to come down, and we gave them land. He said, work the land and help us develop the crops, and we won't even charge you any taxes. So this huge influx of Northerners came down into Mexico. Eventually, there were so many white people coming down into Mexico that the Santa Anna said, no, we got to stop it. So he changed the laws. He started taxing them. He wouldn't give them free land anymore. And it eventually led to the Texas-American War in 1846.
Hmm.
Fast forward 177 years later, you have this whole influx on the southern border of the United States
Mm-hmm.
of, of immigrants coming up from Mexico into the US. And again, like lots and lots and lots. And now the United States is starting to get, oh, no, we don't want that. We're going to build a wall, that kind of thing. And it reflects the Mexican-American War. And so in the Mexican-American War, when we won that war for $14 million,
Wow.
they gave up Texas,
Hmm.
California,
Mm-hmm.
Utah, Montana, and a bunch of other states that then became the United States. Until that time, they were not the United States.
Yeah.
And now the states that they gave up are now the two biggest. Texas and California are the largest, most populated states in the United States. And you hear rumblings of California is going to secede from the Union, and Texas
Mm-hmm.
wants to secede from the Union, reflecting how they were the ones who were grabbed by the
Yep.
United States back then. So the karma is caused by the Jupiter-Saturn synodic cycle, 59, 59. But the directionality,
Yeah.
one of them is going from the left to the right, the other one's going from the right to the left, right?
Yeah.
The Rahu Ketu, Saturn Rahu conjunctions are bullish. The Saturn Ketu conjunctions are bearish. Okay, so there's a very simple uniformity to the history and to the nature of these influences as they impact the market, which can be repeating simply because the same reasons, the same causal factors are creating the involvement, the emotions, the thinking of the individuals who are trading, because people are still people.
Yeah.
The human brain physiology and the genetic code of humans is probably almost identical to what it was 1,000 years ago. We're hoping we evolve a little bit. And I think we are. I think there's definitely an evolutionary process, and people are actually getting more conscious and a little more intelligent. But the masses aren't. Kind of the middle point. The average IQ is 100.
I
That's
I know this. Yeah. I was
the
actually,
average is 100.
I know. I know.
100 is not very smart, you
It's
know?
yeah, that's I actually have a funny story about that. When I was in my early 20s, I was found myself frustrated all the time with people. And I got married early and I said to my husband at that time, "Why am I just so frustrated with everyone all the time?" I said I feel like I was like I don't want to be egoic, but I feel like I'm smarter than everyone else. And he stopped and he looked at me and he goes, "Margo, you are." You know?
Hello?
Yeah. And I was like, and he gave me that statistic. And you know what, though? Actually, knowing that helped me shift my perspective, though, to just have a little more compassion and be more understanding that not everybody thinks
Right,
like I do, right? Everybody
right.
thinks differently, right?
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. And you can always be humbled. I thought I was a
Yeah.
good chess player until I started playing the computer and it's beating me 23 times in a row. But
Yeah.
then I started learning the tricks it was using. So I went from like a 1500 level to a 1700 level to a 1900. Now I'm up to the 2100 level simply by losing so many times.
Yes. 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 That resilience and what we learn from our
Exactly.
mistakes is
The
really,
mistakes often are more valuable than the wins. But
yeah.
I've seen people make a fortune in the market. A lot of guys I know made money in the 1980 gold rally, and they knew nothing. They knew
Yeah.
nothing. They were lucky. They happened to
Yes.
buy, and they held. They didn't know. They didn't know why they held. They just held. Kept it's going up and up and up. And then they were fortunate enough. Somebody was smart enough to recognize that maybe they should get out.
Yeah.
Not at the high, but they got out, right? And then those same guys, all except one of them, lost every penny they made because they had no clue what they were doing. They
Yeah.
just had a lucky trade.
Yeah.
And so
Absolutely. I mean, that could
that's
be
the
almost
nature.
one of
Yeah,
the biggest curses as a new trader. If you get in the market and you get really lucky, then you think that you've got it figured out.
right, right. The only thing you have figured out is you're setting yourself up for a very unfortunate this disappointment.
Yes. Yes.
Anyway, so I'm giving you a feeling for kind of the work that I do, and I want to show another chart that you might find interesting. This is a short-term one. The remember I mentioned that the Moon K2 conjunctions tend to be bullish, and the Moon
Yep.
and they
K2,
happen
Rahu, Moon
every
Rahu is,
month,
oh yeah, that's
more or
right.
less.
Yes. Yep.
Moon K2 tends to be bullish, and
Well,
Moon Rahu tends to be bearish. But in a bull market, you don't go short with the Moon Rahu, even though most of them work. You
right.
just don't
No.
find the trend,
Yeah,
right?
you just don't counter trend. Correct. In a
So
bull.
I'm gonna put up a chart which shows the method that I'm using, because if you look at the last 2 months and then consider the interval of 2 months, the market from the high that it made 2 months before the low has been repeating exactly the move up.
Perfect. Oh yeah, I would
Every,
love to see that.
okay, let me show you this. Gotta find it. Got all these gizmos, all these charts.
I know I always have so many windows open on my computer. Finding the right one is the trick.
I know. I'm wearing out the computer. It's going, please, not another one. You got to be nice to your computer. Hang on a minute.
I
This should,
actually feel really strongly about that. I have been working with my AI for 2 years now, training it. I actually use operant conditioning. So I'm always telling it, because I studied operant conditioning when I had dogs years ago, and it works exceptionally well. It also works with humans and your children. It works with the AI as well. I tell it, great work every time. Like I give it positive feedback every time it gives me what I want. And it is trained to give me exceptional like results. I mean, most everybody I know is like, wow, your AI gives you really good results. I'm like, it's operant conditioning, friend.
that's right. You got to be nice to it. It will be nice to you.
That's right.
So what I did was I labeled a bunch of pivots, with numbers. So like number 3 is this high, number 4 is that low, number 5 is that high, number 6 is that low, number 7 is that high, number 8 is that low, like that. And
Yep.
then and the interval is 2 of these. This is like 1 month, right? This is
Okay.
2 months. Okay.
Yep.
So the interval of repetition is 2 of these, or it comes out as 200 on a 120-minute bar chart. This is 231 bars. Double it is 462 bars. So 462 120-minute bars is the interval I'm using. So if you look at the swings in the past, which are numbered, and you look at what the market did. So for example, from number 2 here, it went down to number 1, right?
Yep.
2 months later, it does it upside down. So from number 2 here, it has a rally.
Oh, look at that. Yep.
And then from number 1 to number
Oh,
13,
wow. That
it
is
has
extreme precision. Look at that.
exactly. Look at that.
That's great.
Every single one is in the right place. Every
Yeah.
one of them, all the way up, is reflecting that move on the way down. What
Wow.
is above, so
So
below,
below.
right?
Yeah. Yes.
Now this is proof positive that
Yep.
ancient little aphorism is still true.
Yes, I know. I love that. Yes. I use that.
So,
I use that that philosophy with Mercury inferior and superior conjunctions in the metals markets, actually, with a fair amount of accuracy. So
perfect.
this is great. I love this. This is so excellent to see the some of the cycles that you use and the way that you're applying this and the alignment with our methodology and our thinking is really quite brilliant. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of this information. This was a real just a gems of knowledge you shared here.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, and I feel that, it's ultimately it's kind of moving in the direction of enlivening the authentic experience of a kind of appreciation of the brilliance of natural law, the
Yes.
brilliance of nature that there is this coding, there's this mathematical setup, there's this stuff deep below the surface, and we can track it with planets. You know, planets are kind of signposts of where things are headed and where they are when they come together and when they separate. And we can track it with numbers and we can track it with measurements. All this is the nature of natural law. And when you begin to recognize that, it adds a level of reverence for nature. One level of reverence is you look at the beautiful trees and the flowers and you appreciate the orderliness of life. But when you see it in the markets, and the markets seem to be chaotic, they seem to be random, they seem to be human, and human is imperfect. When you begin to see the mathematical orderliness, even in the craziness, even in Trump says this and this and that, and then he says the opposite. All of those swings are happening when the moon is conjunct with Ketu. Okay. So it's kind of like nothing is disconnected from this cosmic mind, this cosmic intelligence, you know? And it runs the show even on the level of the economy, even on the level of the markets, and you can prove it. And once you prove it, you're hooked. You recognize, my God, I don't need to look at that other stuff anymore, you know?
Absolutely. I feel the exact same way. It's I feel like it's understanding the terrain of what's going on in whether it's your personal life or whether it's the financial markets or it's on the collective stage is understanding the cycles that are operating. And then once you understand the terrain, then, you know, whatever plays out, it can just be the play on the stage, you know?
Yeah. You become the actor in a script.
Yep, absolutely.
You didn't know that you're an actress, right?
Yeah, I will say though that what the piece you just said about natural law is beautiful because one of the things that never fails to, it gives me goosebumps. I talk about it sometimes in various different videos when I find cycles that repeat with precision, because it really feels like you're revealing a truth that's operating, that's being reflected to you through the financial markets. And one of the reasons I love studying the financial markets is because it gives you real-time data to identify those patterns inside of, and it gives you that immediate feedback. As opposed to, yeah, and history does too. You know, I mean, you gave, there are just brilliant historical cycles available to study as well for a cyclical analysis and astrologers and alike. But something about the financial markets and the way it reflects back is really quite brilliant.
Yeah, because you can measure it and you can see it and you can really look closely at it.
Yep.
And you can study it all different angles of approach, and you know you find a lot of balancing games played out. You know, there's a lot of stuff. You know, like even this decline here. If you look at you create like a nodal line. You know, like a sine wave from this nodal line down to the low, and then flip that distance up above the nodal line, and you have a very high probability where the market's headed.
Yep. That makes sense.
It's called the Tubbs swing. It was discovered by a guy by the name of Tubbs way back when in the 1930s. And it's very popular, very common in the stock market. The stock market has a tendency to do 50% moves. The other markets are different. The soybeans have a tendency to do like 78% and 85%. Huge corrections, and some of the other markets are in line with those. But the stock market is square. It's based on the cube and the square and 90-degree corners and stuff. So you get this kind of flipping thing that happens and for example, if you look at that distance to this high, it's going to be about 1,400 points. And if you flip it back down, that 1,400 points, it takes you back to the low last year in 4,800.
Yeah.
Okay. No accidents.
No, you can, I know squaring cycles in the US equity markets is one of the foundational pieces of what I do when I'm forecasting the market. So that makes perfect sense. Yeah, amazing. This is so great. I love it. Thank you so much, Allen, for sharing all of this with me and with all of the interested viewers out there who are learning cycles, you know? I remember when I first started studying this, I was looking for good information out there. And that was actually part of what inspired me to start my YouTube channel, because there's not a lot of free available good information about forecasting. I found some, of course, but then of course I started, buying lots and lots of books and reading them. I'm predominantly self-taught. I don't have a mentor really, like in real life. I've worked with quite a handful of amazing people, but not one single mentor. I feel like I channel a lot of the information just through my own mathematical knowledge and my astrology knowledge, and then all of the masters whose books I've had the opportunity to read. So it's a real gift to get to sit with you.
My pleasure. It's nice to meet you, and I appreciate greatly your awareness and your capacity to have discovered so many things by yourself, right? It's wonderful.
Yep.
And, you definitely have a good brain.
Thanks, Alan. Do you want to tell the viewers where they can find you?
Oh yeah. So you can go to my YouTube site is Allen Reminick, just my name, ALLENREMINICK. And we have a website called Market Forecast Mastery, marketforecastmastery.com. And that you can find some of the stuff that we do and some different, I have a few things. I have a little matrix channel thing, price projection thing that's based on planets, by the way. And I have a couple of other. Do you ever hear the Ichimoku cloud system?
Yeah, I played around with it for a while when I was first getting started.
What happened? What the thing is, what the original system was it doesn't really work that well on the short term stuff.
Yeah.
It worked really well on the weekly because it was started in the 1960s before anybody had computers. The guy who invented it. It's a good concept. So my programmer wrote an algorithm to modify the inputs to test different combinations of inputs. So we found one that's like off the charts golden. Okay.
Wow.
And a set of rules that I use that are simpler than the original. So like a third grader could trade this thing. And it works extremely well. So we sell stuff like that that's like, on our website. But most of it is the course I teach. If they're interested in my course, I don't do them that often, maybe every 3-4 months. I just started a group. But if you're interested, you can get in touch with me and I'll put you on the list, and maybe there's some way you can jump in with people who've already learned. And that's pretty much the whole deal. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, the viewers, a lot of them may know where to find me. And if you don't, I've got a website. It's margoamala.com. And I have a Patreon and a Discord with a growing community where I forecast the markets and share education and teach some of my systems. I'm working on a course, but it's not out yet. And yeah, you can connect with me through the links in the video description below. It'll all be there. And I'll put the links to Alan's site and all Alan's work as well. And this has been such an awesome conversation. So thank you so much. Bye, viewers. See you soon.
Bye-bye.